Everyone knows the serpent in Genesis 3 is Satan. It is one of the most settled assumptions in all of Christian theology, and Genesis never actually says that, not once. The word the text uses for the creature in the garden is nakash. That is the only name it is given. No title, no identifier, no connection to any prior figure. And that word, nakash, does not simply mean serpent. It means at least 3 different things simultaneously, and one of them changes the entire portrait of what entered Eden. We established in episode 1 that the Bible has no origin story for Satan. We established in episode 2 that the 5 declarations in Isaiah 14 reveal an ambition not for worship, but for structural control over the entire order. Now we arrive at the garden, and the question this episode answers is, who or what actually entered it? 3 things we are investigating. First, what the Hebrew word nakash actually contains, because it is not just a noun for snake. Second, what kind of being the text is describing, because it does not behave like an animal. Third, when the identification with Satan was finally made, and by whom, because it did not happen in Genesis. Let us start with the text itself. Genesis 3:2-1, the opening line. Now the nakash was more arum than any beast of the field that the Lord God had made. 2 words in that sentence deserve everything we have. The first is nakash. The second is arum. Arum is translated as crafty, shrewd, or subtle in most English Bibles. But arum is deliberately double-edged in Hebrew. It can mean shrewd, but it also means naked. The previous verse, Genesis 2:25, uses the same root to describe Adam and Eve. The man and woman were arumim, naked. The author places these 2 verses back to back intentionally. The humans are naked and vulnerable, and the nakash is crafty. It is a literary trap. The wordplay signals that something is about to go very wrong before the conversation even begins, and the conversation is the whole strategy. The nakash does not threaten. It does not coerce. It asks a question. Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree? That question is a masterful distortion. God had permitted everything except one. The serpent frames the exception as the rule. Now nakash itself, the Hebrew root unch, carries 3 distinct meanings, and all 3 may be simultaneously active in Genesis 3. The first meaning is the animal, the literal serpent. The creature is classified among the beasts of the field, and the curse in Genesis 3:14 reinforces it. On your belly you shall go. But that curse is also a clue. If the punishment is to go on its belly, then before the curse, it was not going on its belly. Whatever the nakash was, it had a different posture, a different form. Something was taken from it. Ancient traditions, including Josephus and Midrash, Genesis Rabbah, describe the original nakash as standing erect, perhaps even humanoid in form. Other traditions connect it to the seraphim, fiery winged beings of Isaiah 6. The curse was an amputation of glory, wings stripped, cast to the ground. The punishment tells us more about the creature's original state than the description does. If you are getting something from this investigation, please subscribe before we go further. We are genuinely trying to build something here. And 90% of you watching right now are not subscribed yet. It costs nothing, and it helps us keep making content at this level. Now, the second meaning of nakash, the root unch, is also the basis for words related to shining, to gleaming, to bronze-like radiance. The Hebrew word for bronze, nahosheth, comes from this same root, polished metal, blazing brightness. In the adjectival sense, nakash could be translated not as the serpent, but as the shining one. Luminosity in the Hebrew Bible is a defining characteristic of divine or celestial beings. Daniel 10:6 describes a celestial messenger whose face appeared like lightning and whose limbs were like gleaming bronze. Nahosheth, the same root. If this meaning is active in Genesis 3, the creature Eve encountered was not a common garden animal. It was a radiant being, a luminous figure, something consistent with the divine environment of the garden itself, which would explain why she was not surprised. The third meaning, the verbal form of unchsh, means to practice divination, to read omens, to acquire hidden knowledge through means that bypass the established order. This verb appears in Genesis 44-5, Joseph's silver cup used for divination. It appears in Deuteronomy in the list of prohibited practices. In this reading, the nakash is the diviner, the being whose defining characteristic is its claim to secret, forbidden knowledge. The temptation and the identity are the same thing. The nakash does not just offer hidden knowledge, the nakash is the one who offers hidden knowledge. 3 simultaneous meanings. Serpent, shining, one diviner. All 3 active at once. All 3 contributing to a single entity that is part animal, part celestial, and entirely dangerous. Now the harder question. What kind of being is this? The text classifies the nakash as a beast of the field, one of the creatures God made. But it speaks, it reasons, it has theological awareness, it knows exactly what God said, and it disputes the consequences with precision. No other animal in the Bible speaks, except Balaam's donkey in Numbers 22. And that event is explicitly described as a miracle where God opened the animal's mouth. The nakash needs no such miracle. It speaks as though speech is its natural condition. This places the creature in an ontological no man's land, classified as an animal, but behaving as a member of the divine council. Ezekiel 28 places a figure in Eden, an anointed guardian cherub, covered in precious stones, blameless from the day of creation, who experienced a fall. Genesis never identifies these 2 figures as the same being, but the connection is not arbitrary. The nakash is not behaving like an animal. It knows the arrangement and has decided to subvert it. I want to know where you are landing on this. Drop a comment below. I genuinely read every one, and your perspective shapes what I dig into next. Now the hardest question, when exactly did the nakash become Satan? The answer is not Genesis 3. In the Hebrew Bible, the word Satan is a common noun. It means adversary, accuser, used of human enemies in 1 Kings 11, military opponents. When it appears with the definite article hasatan, it describes a specific office within the divine court. In Job 1 and 2, Hasatan presents himself before God alongside the sons of God. He is authorized to test human righteousness. He functions as a prosecutor, not an autonomous force of evil. In Zechariah 3, Hasatan stands in the heavenly court to accuse the high priest Joshua and is rebuked by the angel of the Lord. In neither of these texts is there any connection to the serpent in the garden. The identification begins very cautiously in the Second Temple period. The Wisdom of Solomon, written approximately 100 years before the Common Era, contains this line, "Through the devil's envy, death entered the world." That is the earliest explicit identification, and it is still indirect. It says, "the devil's envy." It does not name the serpent as the devil. In 1 Enoch, the corruption of humanity is attributed to the Watcher's angels, who descended to mate with women. The temptation of Eve is attributed to an angel named Godriel, not to Satan directly. The Book of Jubilees introduces Mastema, the chief of spirits, whose portrait gradually merges with that of the garden tempter. Over approximately 400 years, across different texts and different authors, the identification was assembled piece by piece. If you want to support what we are building here, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link and a Patreon in the description. Even a small contribution helps. Completely optional. And then, Revelation 12-9, the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan. That is the moment the identification becomes explicit in the biblical text. For the early Christian community, this was likely a confirmation. Not a new claim, but the final naming of what had been assembled over centuries. Genesis preserved the serpent's original ambiguity. The Second Temple period began connecting the dots. Revelation named the dots. This is what theologians call progressive revelation. The full identity of the adversary is not disclosed at the beginning, but gradually unmasked as the story of redemption unfolds. Genesis 3:15, 1 verse. For completely different translations, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. The Hebrew verb is shuph. It appears only 4 times in the entire Old Testament, and no one fully agrees on what it means. The Latin Vulgate translated it as contrat, to crush, a decisive, final victory. That became the dominant reading in Christian tradition. The Greek Septuagint used tereo to watch, to guard, which suggests not a final victory, but perpetual mutual vigilance, watching each other, neither fully winning. The Vulgate also introduced a unique variant. The subject of the crushing was rendered feminine. She shall crush your head. That pronoun became the foundation for centuries of Marian theology. What the Hebrew most likely describes is a mutual striking. Both strike, one at the head, one at the heel. The outcome is not resolved in the verse itself. Both strike, one at the head, one at the heel. The outcome is not resolved in the verse itself. Genesis 3 is not the end. It is the opening move of a war. In the next episode, we ask what happened between the garden and the flood, because something did, and the text describes it in 6 of the strangest verses in the entire Bible. Subscribe. Thank you genuinely for watching.